For many years now, Israel's burgeoning tech sector that earned the country the nickname Startup Nation has been a kind of golden goose for the economy, drawing massive investment from abroad and fueling much of the export sector here. But in 2022, the eggs were a little less golden, or perhaps the start of a worrying trend. According to the NGO Startup Nation Central, Israeli tech startups attracted $15.5 billion in investment last year. That's not a bad number in itself, but is a sharp 43% drop from a year earlier when that figure was $27 billion. Especially hard hit was cybersecurity firms, which are usually a strong point of Israel's tech sector. Now, rising inflation and interest rates, continuing supply chain problems, and other global factors share some of the blame. But could the bloom be fading a bit from the gleam of Startup Nation? Well, joining us for more is Professor Niron Hashai, Dean of the Arison School of Business at Reichman University and co-founder of the Israel Strategy Conference, and he joins us from Herzliya. Professor Hashai, thanks for joining us. I mentioned it briefly, but how do you see the reasons behind this drop in investment in tech startups here?
So I must say that this was quite expected, and this is not something that is only relevant to Israel. Following COVID, there was a lot of cheap money in the markets, which, to make a long story short, allowed investors to make somewhat not the best decision, because when money is cheap, you invest even in companies that do not have a very solid business model. And in this situation, we saw startup companies or high-tech companies raising more and more money when money is cheap, even if they didn't have such a promise. At some point, because of inflation, because of the fact that interest rates have increased, suddenly markets began to be more complicated. Suddenly it was not so easy to raise money anymore. And given that also there was a slowdown in many markets and sales began to drop, investors decided to hold their investments. So this is something that happens in many other high-tech sectors, not only in Israel. We saw it coming in Israel. There were, valuations were way, way, way too high. I wouldn't worry too much for the long run. We probably will see this trend continuing in 2023, so it's not the end of it. We have another year and a half. It's very hard to predict. But this does not mean at all that Israel has lost its worldwide position as a tech leader.
All right, well, but certainly things like higher interest rates may extend beyond those years, and it's understandable. These are external factors, but this is a new global economic environment that the tech industry here has to deal with. So how should they be adjusting themselves? And maybe how should the government be also helping them, at least in this somewhat more fallow, short to midterm?
So I think one thing that high-tech companies should be doing, and they are doing, is to be a bit, let's call it a bit more modest. Wages to programmers, engineers, etc., were so exaggerated. The fancy Purim parties that we saw last year, probably we will not see them this year. Private planes, jets, going to vacations abroad. This we felt a bit bad about it. We were a small high-tech company raising money for investors, and then you throw it on all these poshy things that do not really contribute to your business. So this thing should stop. I assume that employees will be laid off, salaries will reduce. So all this is happening and will be happening. But I also think that it is a good thing, because it means rationalization of the market. The bad companies, the companies that raise money for virtually nothing, or let's not say nothing, for business models that are not so promising, will die. And this is something that should have probably happened in any case.
Well, that's
the better companies will survive.
Right. So just briefly, let me ask you, the better companies, what are the sectors within the tech sector that you see, if there are investors watching, maybe they should be looking to invest in the coming year?
So, we are now all digesting the ChatGPT with all its new strength. So I'm sure that everything that relates to data, big data, AI, will be flourishing. And despite the fact that we saw most of the decreases in cyber, if you use data a lot, you also need to protect it. I also believe that cyber will be extremely strong. In Israel, we have a competitive advantage, a comparative advantage as a country because we need to deal with, cybersecurity because of our, political situation in the army. We have so many units that deal with that. So I think that these sectors, data, cybersecurity, even though they got a blow, they are sectors that are quite promising. Another important sector that I would watch, we cannot ignore the fact that our planet faces huge environmental problems. So everything that relates to climate tech, I think, will be flourishing.
All right. Well, let's look forward to a brighter year for the tech sector in 2023. Professor Niron Hashai from Reichman University, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.